welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I am Midge Munster. And Penny, they say to dress for the job that you want.
I have heard this.
And I feel like for years now, I have been dressing for the job that I want. And not a single person has asked me to do my dream job of horror hosting.
Ooh.
So I thought the best way to present this now would just be to talk really loudly about it on the podcast, and hopefully someone will ask me to do it.
There you go. That's the best method I know.
No, but I did want to delve into horror hosting a bit today because this is a kind of a time-honored tradition that I think is a very cool, weird thing that happened. And I want to talk a little bit about the origins as well as some of our most outstanding horror hosts of history.
Excellent.
So what is horror hosting and how did it originate? The idea of this is not unique to television. However, that's what most of us, really know it as. But it kind of has its origins in things like the Tales from the Crypt comics that established the Crypt Keeper, or the Phantasmagoria and spook shows of the 30s and 40s, or radio programming. They all have this idea of a sort of like guide to the other side, as it were, to guide you into the dark. And so when we talked a little bit about this in the Elvira episode, but when the Universal Studios released their horror movie packages to TV networks for syndication, they started looking for exciting ways to present the material, and in their Shock and Son of Shock packages that they gifted to the studios, they suggested the idea of having a host present the material, and thus horror hosts were born. So typically these were a local television station employee, like a random person who was kind of plucked out of the bullpen and selected to put on some kind of costume, usually portraying some kind of otherworldly ghoul, mad scientist, Transylvanian count of sorts, and would make jokes at the movies and things and host the late night audiences when the films were presented. So a lot of the films in these packages were also B grade at best, and were not always good. So the horror hosts also were kind of tasked with making these films worth sticking around and watching. But when they first came to be, there was also kind of this idea that, these packages were the first time horror was shown on TV rather than in theaters, these movies. And when you think about it, when you go to a horror movie, go see it in the theater, it is a very communal experience, and it's more fun to watch it with someone else. And so these characters kind of served as a way to make that shared viewing experience happen. And it was often, kind of suggested that they're watching the movie along with you and commentating. And so they become very beloved local celebrities because people feel like they're hanging out with their ghoul friends.
Hell yeah.
So let's kind of talk about the horror hosts themselves. So the first generally accepted as being the first true horror host is, of course, Mila Nurmi, a Finnish-American actor who played Vampira. Now, I didn't know this. This is really interesting, actually. So Vampira's look was, I did know part of this, but Nurmi based that on Charles Addams' Morticia from the comic strips. But at that time, she wasn't Morticia yet. It was just the nameless mother character in these Addams Family comic strips. But what I didn't know is that Nurmi put a costume together of that character for Lester Horton's big Halloween costume ball in New York, and won the prize for best costume out of 2,000 attendees. And because she was, everybody was like, oh, wow, there she is. She got the attention of a television producer who then came to her and was like, hey, do you want to do this character on TV? And so that's when she changed a little bit about the costume, made it a little more vampy and more,
Mm-hmm.
her like snatched waspy waist, and made her into Vampira. So even though her show was never aired outside of LA, it was within 3 weeks of it airing, she was featured in Life magazine. It was getting a lot of attention for just being something that people hadn't really seen before. And uh, I didn't realize this either. That show, the Vampira show, aired for less than a year.
Wow.
Yeah. Which I feel like is a real pattern with these
Yeah.
shows that we think of as iconic. We talked about this with like Munsters and Addams Family too. Like the runs were not very long. um, but it runs from April 1954 to the beginning of April 1955. But had a massive impact on like the standard for the horror host show format. And uh, then, of course, we'll get a bit into this later, but Normie was offered the opportunity to put the show back up in 1981, but walked away from that project. And we will come back to that, but hold on to that information.
All right. Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing. But on the other coast, in New York City, there was the cool ghoul known as Zachary, who was on the scene. I have actually never heard of Zachary, but
No, me
he's
neither.
apparently a pretty big player in this history. So while Vampira was the first of the horror hosts, Zachary is the one who really kind of set the precedent for this like goofy character.
Mm-hmm.
Vampira played it very straight, very almost hypnotic. Like she's
Yeah.
really like pulling you in. Zachary, who was originally Roland, he is doing the Shock Theater in Philadelphia and is doing like more of a sketch comedy, like skits between commercial breaks, making it a lot more funny.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you do not know him from horror hosting, which I did not, you might be familiar if you're a Halloween music person with his Billboard Top 10 song, Dinner with Drac from 1958.
Oh.
I actually have heard this song and didn't realize it was him. This is on my like Midge's Vintage Halloween playlist on Spotify. It's very funny.
You
And
were a Zachary fan all along.
I
You
know,
didn't
I
even
didn't even
know it.
know. But if you, it makes a lot of sense now retrospectively listening to it because it's very it's not singing, let's say that. It's
Yeah.
very like when I found out like it's just
Yeah.
very talking, but that makes sense now. So like I said, the character was originally called Roland, and he was like kind of a ghoulish undertaker looking character. And he was on WCAU's Shock Theater, which debuted in 1957 in Philadelphia. And Shock Theater was also the first to implement the kind of like break in on films where, the audio of the film would be continued, but they would disrupt the visual feed, and Roland would like come into the movie and be doing some kind of like stupid thing. They would have him like writing on a tombstone or like doing weird, goofy physical comedy. So that's the first time we see the host like interacting with the film in that way. And that show ran for 92 episodes and went through 1958. And then he was moved to New York. So this is when he becomes Zachary. And this is like what people most seem to know him for.
Mm-hmm.
The show got rebranded from Shock Theater to Zachary at Large. But the format stayed pretty much the same. The character name changed, the show name changed, but he continues doing his thing. I also loved that his like tagline is the cool ghoul.
Yes, that's a good name.
So moving then into out of the 60s and 50s and 60s, jumping forward. Remember when I told you to put a pin in that Mila Normie conversation?
I do.
So we've talked quite a bit about her already. And if you haven't listened to this episode, be sure to go back and check that out. But what we did not really talk about in our previous episode about this person was the beef that happened and
Yes.
why this went down. So, like I said, Vampira got the opportunity to re-up the Vampira show with KHJ TV in the 80s. And she said, yeah, I would love to do that. But her like stipulation was she would sign over her intellectual property. So she helped with everything. She like consulted on sets. She helped write the scripts. She was like doing everything
Mm-hmm.
to make it screen accurate to the original. And she said, you can have all that. My one condition is that I get to pick and mentor the actress that takes my place. Well, lo and behold, the station did not uphold their end of the agreement and ended up
Ooh.
hiring a little lady by the name of Cassandra Peterson behind Mila Nurmi's back. And so the first day of filming, um, Cassandra is doing this character under the name Vampira still, on the like Vampira set, using the scripts that Mila Nurmi had assisted on writing, mimicking the style of the original show. Um, and Mila Nurmi is not happy
Yeah.
because Cassandra Peterson is playing Vampira as like a valley girl.
Mm-hmm.
um, so Nurmi sends a cease and desist to them during their first day of filming. And so midday they get this and they're like, well, in order to move forward, we've got to change the character name. So all they do is change the name. And as you'll remember, if you listen to our Elvira episode, basically what they did was very quickly, everyone on the set put names in a hat and they drew out a name and boom, bang, bang,
Elvira was born.
we've got an Elvira. So this is kind of like sad because Mila Nurmi really did get kind of done dirty in
Yeah.
this situation, and she does end up suing them later, and this was uber crappy. She like gets all this evidence, like they are literally just using my intellectual property and they backed out on a contract. She's going to take them to court, and the day of her court appearance, her lawyer suddenly quits and takes all the evidence and everything with
What?
him that had been compiled. I would say, if I had to venture a guess, that somebody paid him off.
Yeah. That's a
And
very, very
so,
shady.
yeah, so the court case just never comes to be, and they have to declare Elvira and the studio as the winners, quote. Uh, and so that is crappy. As much as I adore Elvira and adore like everything she's done, this situation is very shitty.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel very, very sad for Mila Nurmi in this situation because much like Elvira, she was kind of a badass business bitch at this
Mm-hmm.
point. Like she owned 100% of Vampira. When she left the Vampira show, she refused to sell any of the rights to the character just to ABC. Like she was very um in control of her intellectual property, which for a woman in like the 40s and 50s is a big freaking deal. Um and yeah, so she gets screwed over and that really sucks. But we do get Elvira out of it, which is delightful. And so her horror hosting show is Elvira's Movie Macabre, and she's, you know, playing her little goth valley girl. And but what was really unique about this and why it worked is because she's a valley girl, but she's also very smart in like the quippy. She's funny, she's sexy, she's sarcastic. She obviously becomes a huge hit. And this is the first time we see a horror host get nationally
Mm-hmm.
recognized.
Yeah,
Because
I didn't realize that Vampira show was just in LA. Like that makes sense, like
right,
thinking about the time period, but it just didn't occur to me that that would be the case.
right, isn't that crazy? Because she's such a like iconic name now.
Yeah.
um but yeah, I mean, she did get some national recognition in magazines and
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
and
but the
she
show itself.
right, and I do believe she was brought on the Ed Sullivan show as well. But yeah, her like fan base grows exponentially long after the Vampira show is over.
Yeah.
So then I have one more person I want to address. Well, I guess two more technically, but of the OG squad. And I think you're going to be very excited about this one, Penny.
Ah,
Because we have a pretty prominent horror host from your neck of the woods, from
we
the
do.
Chicagoland area. And who is
Who?
that, Penny?
It's Svengoolie.
It's
Who
Svengoolie!
some of you may remember I brought up in the Elvira episode, and you were like, "Wait, what? Why are you bringing up Svengoolie right now?"
Penny said, "Get ready for a Milwaukee connection."
I...
Uh, but yeah, so Svengoolie, I didn't realize, you may have more knowledge because this was local to you. Um, so this started with Jerry G. Bishop in the 70s portraying Svengoolie.
Mm-hmm.
And in this iteration, he's like kind of a hippie character. Like
Ooh.
he's got like a long wig and sunglasses and bell bottoms, and he's kind of like a hip dude. Um, I was not familiar with that.
No,
Um,
I'm not familiar with that version either.
yeah, but so when Bishop originated this character and when he was still on the air, and he was like I mean, similar situation to the rest of them. He's like a television personality that has like interviewed presidents and crap, and they're like, "Do you want to host a horror
Right? Do you
late
want to
night
wear a
show?
weird costume and show horror movies?
Do you want to do a weird Transylvanian accent?" Um, and so, but when he's on the air, Bishop was receiving mail from this guy named Rich Cause, who
Mm-hmm.
would be sending him bits and ideas, and Bishop started using those ideas on the air. So then when he retired from the role, he recommended to the producers that this random guy who had been sending him mail, Rich Cause, take over the role. And so this is the gentleman that most of us who know Svengoolie know as Svengoolie. But they originally introduced him as son of Svengoolie
Mm-hmm.
because he looked obviously nothing like Jerry Bishop. But this is when the character gets revamped to the one that we all kind of know as the top hat, skeleton face, long like curly black wig guy. So this, I believe, 1970. I didn't write it in my notes. 1979, though, I believe, is when he takes when Bishop leaves, and then Rich Cause takes over a couple years later, and does that until 1986 when the show was canceled. But then in 1995,
It's back, baby.
is back, baby, and Rich Cause and Bishop are talking, and Jerry Bishop's like, you know what? You've been doing this character. You're all grown up now. You get to be Svengoolie. Drop the son of. You are Svengoolie now.
He pulled out Excalibur.
Yeah.
And knighted him Svengoolie.
Yes. So now Cause has been playing Svengoolie ever since, and is still to this day playing Svengoolie. And the show now this is again like a nationally available horror
Mm-hmm.
host. He now airs on MeTV. So that's pretty cool. I don't know. I knew of him. I don't know a ton about him, but you seemed to be very familiar based on your Elvira episode reaction.
Yeah,
I would love to
I
hear.
would say lightly familiar. Like I didn't like watch him regularly, but it was definitely like a thing where I'd be channel surfing, and I
Mhm.
was like, "What's this weird thing happening?" There's like this guy in skull makeup who
You're like, is
like,
this Black Parade?
right? I know. Who's like telling a joke or doing a little bit. And I think I remember like I was watching at some point and like my dad wandered in and he was like, "Oh man, I used to watch Svengoolie and on Chicago TV, back in the day. He's back again." Blah blah blah. And I actually have two of my local friends are big Svengoolie fans, and they make martinis and watch Svengoolie every week.
Oh,
Is like their like
fun.
date night.
And I thought it was really, they introduced something called Sven Surround at one point. This was like a new thing but it was very based in Zachary tradition
Okay.
that I guess it was based on Sensurround, which was like an audio company at the time. And so Svengoolie, while he would not like necessarily quote be on screen, he would like audio break into the movie and be like commentating and doing sound effects and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of his contribution that was like really well known was this audio layover of his commentary, and it got canceled. Like people, like they stopped doing it. I'm assuming that it didn't say why, but I'm assuming probably at the request of like the studios being like, hey, stop interrupting.
Yeah.
But then like there was this audience uproar, and so they brought it back because everybody was like, bring back Spencer around.
Bring back Spencer around.
But what was also specifically interesting about that was that then Mystery Science Theater 3000 yes. very specifically credits Svengoolie's formula for how he hosted for being what they kind of based Mystery Science Theater 3000 off of.
Another great Midwestern institution.
Yes. But yeah, so that I was interested to learn more about him. I didn't, like I said, I've seen his face. I knew generally who he was, but I didn't know a lot about it. So it was
and
that's cool.
I don't know if this is it spoiling something to talk about what he's doing right now?
No, go.
He is doing like a horror host search.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, here we go.
You should look into this. Yeah, he announced earlier this month, I think, that like he was like, I'm not retiring, but I've been doing this a long time, and I think that I want to like introduce another like new horror host to the world, and is like, I think going to like see people at take auditions at conventions, but I think you can also like submit a video.
Very cool.
And yeah, so if you want to be a horror host, you could be part of the Svengoolie family potentially.
Sounds like a I don't know so you want to be a horror host,
like, right.
It's like
you can read about this on All Hallows Geek, an incredible source for Halloween news.
All things eek, yeah. But in the eek and geek. Wow, okay, that's cool. Well, I promise not to forget y'all when I'm a big horror host in the Svengoolie fam.
Midge Pyra.
So yeah, to kind of bring us into present day, I think probably the most prominent current version of a horror host we see is Joe Bob Briggs.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Bob, he's not new. He was the host of several shows, Joe Bob's Drive-In Theater, and from that was like 1986 to 1996. Then TNT television, he had Monster Vision from 96 to 2000. But as of late, he's moved into streaming land and now has a show called The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs on Shudder. I feel like our last two episodes,
once again, not sponsored.
Not sponsored. Damn, maybe we should have. Maybe we should have called Shudder before and be like, "Hey, listen, we're about to really plug you.
Blow up the spot,
you want to give us like $3,000, please?" No. But yeah, that show started in 2018, and what's unique about Joe Bob is he's a bit different because he is a human host. He doesn't have any kind of I know,
a human hosting a horror show. I don't know about that.
In this economy,
taking jobs from good hardworking monsters and ghouls.
Support your local monster mortuary. But yeah, he's not a ghoulish persona. He has like a kind of a redneck persona, a Jeff Foxworthy
from the name
type.
I could kind of guess that.
Yeah, he does kind of this yeehaw drive-in theater enthusiast persona, but it works. It's really fun. But it is, what I do like about this is it's very cool to see the horror host tradition brought to a new platform like a streaming service.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to open doors for even more opportunities to see this grow for a new generation, which is very cool. And I mean, even God, honestly, like things like YouTube and stuff, anybody can have their own quote show now, which is very cool.
We have one right here.
I was gonna say, yeah, I mean, I guess we are technically kind of horror hosts in a way, right? We host this podcast. But yeah, I mean, like I said, honestly, this is my dream job. This is when I quote created Midge Munster, this was what I had in mind. I was like, I want her to be this haunted housewife. And I think, a lot of people, what is really cool about horror hosts is that for a lot of people um, who were young when these people were on the air, it it very much mimicked, which I don't know that they did this on purpose, but these costumed characters hosting movies had the similar effect of like a children's TV show
Oh
host.
yeah.
And they were funny, and they were, they took the edge off of the syndication like horror films a little bit. They give some levity to it. And so for a lot of people, this was their introduction to horror as children.
Hmm.
And people started watching for the hosts, not for the movies, which it's just a very cool, like I said, a community building thing. And there's, when you go to conventions and stuff and you see people who are in this vein in some way, it is very familial, and like that's very cool. And I think it's a very like, just, I don't know, it's a sweet thing, and I really like it. So like I said, this is my dream job. I'm gonna do it someday, putting that out there.
Heck yeah. Do
Have
it.
your people call my people, Shutter.
I mean, I wouldn't say no to like, horror hosting or MST3King a spooky movie with you. Just
Oh,
if you needed an assistant to, work on your reel.
we should do an episode where we try it.
Yeah, it's like a commentary.
Yeah, we try horror hosting on the pod. That'd be fun.
I'm into it. Stay
Do
tuned.
you
Let us know, listeners,
Yeah.
if that's something that you would actually want.
Yeah, submit B movie ideas. Well, and I think I have a love for this too, because I have fond memories when I was growing up. My dad and I would like very specifically spend Sundays watching the sci-fi movie Sundays, when they would have those terrible B films that were
Yeah.
like Yeti, ogre, troll, and it was like the worst CGI you'd ever seen in your life, and like terrible writing, but they were so campy and so fun. And my dad and I would like banter over the movie,
Yeah.
and I didn't even realize at the time, like, quote, what we were doing. But now, when I grew up and I had like this love for Elvira's movie Macabre and these things, it's like, oh, I've been doing this in my head for years.
Yeah.
Do you I mean, I think I probably know who yours is, but do you have a favorite horror host?
I mean, for my, for the cred, I have
Yeah.
to say I love
You
Svengoolie.
gotta
I
say
mean, I
Svengoolie.
feel like Elvira is probably my very favorite. Like,
Yeah.
just her
Well,
character is the one that I like the most.
and she's tricky because she's also like so much more than that now.
Yeah, because it's like she's got her movies and she's got all that other good stuff. And I did sometimes, when I was older, I would see reruns of Movie Macabre on, like, I think it was
Yeah.
like MeTV or something like that, some off-brand network station.
Right. I found out through my research. I will plug this on Amazon. You do have to rent it. It's like $2.99 to rent. But there's a really, I'm not going to say it's quality made, but a documentary called American Scary that is about horror hosts.
Ooh.
And it delves into all of this, but also some lesser known folks, and talks a lot about the culture of it. It's very interesting. Like I said, the quality isn't great, but it was definitely made a long time ago, because they interview Mila Nurmi in it.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Like, she was alive. Zachary is alive in it. Like, they interview him. So it was made quite some time ago. But I don't remember where I was going with this. There was something very specific I was going to bring up. Oh my God.
Was it about horror hosts going beyond their character?
Oh, no, but that's a good point. Well, yeah, and it is very that, isn't it? Like an SNL where they get kind of stuck in this character. No, what I was going to bring up is that they focused on a woman from Kansas City, Kansas, right across the border from me, and her name is Crematia.
Oh my goodness.
Host's name. And I had no idea. I didn't know about her, so I'm gonna delve into that and see what I can find out about that, because it was cool that I have my own Svengoolie.
You do. Your own local host.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening today. I am glad we got to talk a little bit about this. If you are enjoying the podcast, and you want me to be the next Svengoolie family member, please leave us a review. Wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you leave us a review, we might just read it right here on the air. I believe we have something to share today.
We sure do. So this is a comment left on our Podbean, where our podcast is hosted. You can listen to it there also if you like.
Yeah.
This is from Tea Cake Cat, who left us 5-star emojis and said, "It's taken me 9 days, but I've managed to listen to every single episode to date. The back and forth between the two of you is amazing, and there is always something new and appropriately spooky to learn. Bat emoji, pumpkin emoji, spider emoji."
That is some dedication.
Right? I'm always so delighted when people are saying that they're like listening to mass amounts of episodes, and I'm like, I hope that we're still fun when you listen to us
Right,
all at
back to
once.
back. That's literally, I was just like doing the math in my head because we have like 54 up, but that's like 30 hours of Ghouls Night In that
Yeah.
person binged in 9 days. Good for you.
Congratulations.
Thanks for committing. Well, thank you for your review. If you are interested in keeping up with us outside of the podcast, you can follow us over on Instagram at Ghouls Night In Pod. We post, pictures and things of things we talk about in the episode, and you can chat with us in the comments over there. And if you're looking for me, you can find me across all platforms at Midge Munster.
And you can find me across all of the internet at Penny Snark. And just because we haven't mentioned it for a while, if you
Yep.
are interested in Ghouls Night In merch, you can find t-shirts, tote bags, mugs, stickers. That is at midgemunster.com/shop. It is also linked in the episode notes. And if you do wear it, we would love to see it. So please do send us a pic, or when you post it, tag us so we can gush over how cute you look.
Yes, please. You also read my mind. I was literally like, we haven't talked about merch in a
We
while.
haven't.
Yes, please please put our faces on your water bottles and stuff. We would love to
Yes.
see it. Well, that is it for Ghouls Night In, and until next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.